business,
Okay.
we'll just call it water.
Yeah, it's just a
water
query.
supply and housing kind of thing. Yeah.
And ask for more research, really.
Yeah, okay. Housing, okay, any other, discussion or
Documents, I
changes?
guess, can we under action items then, or?
Or,
No,
yeah.
maps, 5.3.
Yeah, there is one, yeah, there we go, 5.3. Any other comments for the agenda? No, okay, move to approve, seconded by Maureen, everybody in favor? Yes, okay, good, passed. Next, adoption of minutes from our July 5th. Anybody have any questions or comments? No, they look good to me, I'll move to accept the minutes. Second by Maureen and Frits, yep, okay, everybody in favor? Yes, okay, moving along. Public comments, we have one member of the public, any comments? No? Okay, no public comments. Action items, so review of action items, which are on page 6 from July 5th. Councillor Nicholson, Daniel Martin, and Rob going to meet to coordinate public and speakers event, or to coordinate. Yeah, so we haven't done that yet, have we? Nothing further than that, so that's ongoing. Councillor Nixon, Allison, and Robin to contact North Shore roommates, that's ongoing as well. I don't think any of us have done that, yep. And then Robin to edit the workshop notes and add a title, a date, and preamble. I can't remember if I've done that. So let's circle it and I'll check back on that. I've kind of checked out for the summer, so.
Good for you, yeah.
Thank you. And then number 1 from previous meetings is the color-coded maps, which we'll be looking at today. Thank you, Daniel.
Yay, Daniel, you're done, your whole long list.
Wow.
That's impressive.
Just a
Okay.
question concerning the roommate registry.
Yeah.
Do we have anything like that going on Bowen? Yeah.
Just one.
All right.
No, I
good.
think
Just
no.
so I know where I'm asking from, and I'll commit to doing that.
Oh,
Robin.
great.
You've
Thank you,
lots on your
Allison.
plate.
Oh.
Yeah, that would be great.
Do you have
Okay.
the contact information?
No, I need that.
Okay, so maybe Maureen should
But
send
I
that.
could probably find it if I just Google North Shore Seniors Roommate Registry. I suspect it will come up.
Yeah, okay, that's
it.
great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So number 5, we can go into 5.1, the housing speaker series.
Coming at the meeting. Okay, so point back later today. Okay, thanks, bye.
Maureen?
This is in relation to the rent snort.
I think so, the ones that are coming up now. Yeah.
So we have, you may have seen the advertisements. We have 2 rent smart workshops coming up, one for tenants and the other for landlords. They'll be on a Saturday, they're free sessions. The registration is open at this point. The purpose of the sessions is generally to provide information that will be useful for the 2 groups and to go over some of the aspects that make good tenants and good landlords and what recourse people have when problems arise. Want to add?
Yeah, so far registration's a bit low, which is, I think, kind of typical on Bowen. So we're only a week away from the tenant one, week from Saturday. So if you generally think that there might be people you know, or if you can put it out on whatever your networks might be, social media, I'm going to try and do that later today as well through Birch and through my own. I think they're really valuable sessions, and it's like 3 hours on a Saturday, and I think people will get a lot out of it.
How many do you have registered so far?
I think 3 or 4 in each session, and there can go up to 15 people
Right.
in each. So we definitely have lots of space. And apparently from what Tess, who's the instructor, she said they're really good. Like, it's not just, they're very interactive. They've made them so that they're interesting, and they're not just her standing at the front of the room talking for 3 hours at all. It's very much, there's interactive things, there's little exercises. So it should actually be interesting, and I think very much informative. And I think I'd like to push, because we won't go too much in details, I saw something online yesterday that, I think we hear that there's not a lot happening, and I feel like this is one thing that's happening.
Yeah.
And it might seem small, like we're not building housing, but it's something that we're doing that's very
Yes.
proactive, right? And like helping education and I think the big thing on both sides, I wouldn't even say it's exclusively one or the other, is about knowing your rights and your responsibilities. Like, I think that's huge. And even just that can help make that for better tenants and landlords and all that. So if we can get lots of people doing those, I think the whole thing might be better. And yeah, I don't know how it'll shake out in the future as to whether, you know, we have some sort of registry of people renting or roommates or whatever, if it helps that you've taken this course, or, you know what I mean? I just think it's overall gonna be a good thing if we can get as many people to do as possible. It's a great opportunity.
A way to get the word out is through Bowen Island, everything else on Facebook site.
It's there.
It is there already?
Yeah.
It's there, but the thing is, you kind of have to get it out,
You have to
get it
keep-
out, get
Yes,
it out.
you do.
And then people tend to register, we all
Late.
know,
Yeah,
at the last minute.
Did you post in it?
I posted it, it's in the municipalities,
Yeah.
Facebook page, it's in the island page.
I was just thinking, I don't think I mentioned it to Bronwyn. We should probably see if the paper just wants to, I don't know if it's of any interest, because we could make it
Yeah,
for
it
next
is
week's
interest.
Yeah,
Thursday.
it should be, and there's enough time if we
Yeah, if we
do that
Okay.
essentially now.
Okay.
Would I be allowed to post if I did something as well?
If you want to
yeah.
just reinforce.
Yes,
I'm
just
sure.
reinforce what you
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and so like sharing something that's publicly available and you sharing it, and
That's
especially,
okay. Because I come with a
Yes.
slightly different voice to
Yeah.
our
yeah, and I
Absolutely.
think as long as, when we've talked about this, as long as you're posting in your own voice and you're
Yes.
not speaking on behalf of the committee, that's
Yes.
totally fine.
Good.
So if you,
That's what I
Allison,
needed to
or
know.
whoever are posting and saying, hey, this is a great workshop, the Birch and the municipality, we're co-presenting it, are putting on, you know, here's why I think you should do it, and it's your
Yes.
own voice, that's absolutely
Okay.
encouraged.
All right.
And not only acceptable, but encouraged.
I might email to send it to you guys first.
Sure,
Just so you can check.
Okay, so I will put on to contact the newspaper as well. Because it'd be really great if it was a success. And I think it will be. I think we'll get a little surge next week. I'm hoping so. Great. Okay, and then the speaker series, we'll kind of take that action item and see if we can get some more people if we want to keep that going. We'll probably more for the fall.
We're probably close to exhaust the budget
Yeah.
for this year. So it may end up being something that we look at for the coming year.
Yeah, yeah, okay, great. Okay, 5.2, secondary suite bylaw review. So we've got, this is a big item, we've got like 40 minutes set aside for this. What happened a couple of weeks ago, a few of us met here and we discussed, we went over the, I think Noe and Michael was here as well, that's who else was here. We went over the secondary suite bylaw review, some work that Daniel had done, and we just literally, I just typed up notes as we were talking. So they're included here at the end, so pages 7 and 8, or no, sorry, 7. So the idea being, we would hopefully talk through this today as a committee, come together and agree on what our recommendations as a committee would be, and then we would sort of finalize this report, and then at our next meeting at the beginning of October, we would say, yes, this is the report we want to go to council, and then it would go to council, and that idea being that's in time with when Daniel will be submitting to council, so our report will go in with that as well. So that's the idea behind this. So if we want to dive in, I don't know if anybody has any thoughts, otherwise maybe I'll just dive in and we'll read it out. So we sort of just roughly divided it, and these are just kind of running notes from what we talked about, so it's not really, don't get attached to the formatting or anything like that. We sort of had section 1, which I think kind of was like pretty straightforward, like they were easy things that were just really quick changes. So suggest removing the B&B conflict, because currently there's a rule that you can't have a B&B and a secondary suite. And we all kind of thought, well, that doesn't seem to make sense. It doesn't, yeah, it seems an arbitrary limitation. So we sort of said we would agree, or I can't remember if these were Daniel's things that we're agreeing, or if we came up with these on our own, doesn't really matter. We sort of felt that that was something that didn't really need to happen. So I don't know if people want to discuss.
I think it's a great idea because it opens up the agro-tourism world. It'll ever be a small market on the island, but people like Calderwood Farms, they can either have employees,
Yeah.
but the employees, agriculture doesn't make enough money, so that's the lifestyle choice, but the Airbnb world can provide the tourism, the income,
Yeah.
to allow the whole operation to continue. So I think it's a healthy thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it'll just provide a lot more flexibility, and it means that when people build these substantial and not inexpensive buildings, it means them and future owners have more flexibility in what they're using them for, and yeah, and I don't think that, yeah, thanks.
We're also not forcing people to make one choice or another. space and the services are there.
Okay, great, so no strong objections, so that one's good, we'll keep that one in. And then this was what we discussed, and I think with Frits, your review of some of this stuff as well, is removing that 40% limit. So right now, there's a limit on that the suite can only be 40% of the household, and that's sort of following the building code guidelines. But we can remove that, we recommend removing that. It's then up to people to do what they like. So if they wanted to make them not 40-60%, there would be building code implications, but that's their choice. But if they want to stick with the 40-60, they would have those. Essentially, the building code's slightly easier for the separations and stuff. It's this 40-60 split. So just removing that as a limit, leaving the building code as a limit. And
But there's also an actual limit, right, Danielle?
There's 90 square meters.
Right.
90 square meters is 1,000, so if 1,000 is 40%, you know what I mean? If you have a big house, 40% is far more than 1,000. So what I'm saying is that there's, even if the 40-60 applies, which is still, don't really know how they can control the building code, who lives in which part. You know, like, it's like, how do you really monitor that? So, you know, if you say there has to be 40-60 split, fine. I think the idea that the owner lives in the principal residence and that's the bigger unit, I think that's just crazy.
is that
Well, is that
specified anywhere
related
in our
then?
bylaw?
Well, no, but if you
Or
say,
is-
if you use the word principal residence, right? And then there's a secondary suite, and it says that 60 principal, 40% is the secondary suite. Does it then imply that the principal residence is lived in by the owner? Or not?
No. So some municipalities have specific stuff that say like you need to be a resident, you need to be a something, and we don't. We do for like a home occupation, it has to be operated by a resident of the property or something like that. And some places have very specifically like you have to live there to be able to rent out a secondary suite, and ours doesn't. So we have places where people have a house with a suite and they rent them both out, they don't live there. And that's
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
Or somebody could live in the secondary suite and rent out the house.
Yeah, I feel like it's less to do with who occupies what, and it's more to do with the fact that it's still technically one dwelling
Yeah.
unit
Yeah.
that has two separate living spaces, as opposed to, and this is what Vancouver did right last year, is everything becoming a duplex, which then has different implications. Whereas this is a single dwelling unit with a secondary suite, whether it's attached or detached or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think at the moment, and I agree with you, it shouldn't matter who lives in which one, whether it's, both rented or
No, so,
owner or whatever, but it's owned by a single person. I think that's
Yes,
the
but then-
censure.
well,
It's
well,
owned by a single person, and
yes,
it's
but it
a
is,
single.
absolutely, it's not a duplex, absolutely, it's
Yeah.
not started titled, I
Yeah.
understand that. But the 40-60 split is kind of fine, because if you can live in whatever part you want, you know what I mean? There's nothing really that restrictive. The 90 square meters, I find arbitrary, and I have no idea why we enforce that. So I think that if the 40-60 is something that's in the building code, I actually can't remember that, because we do all kinds of secondary suites, and they're always restricted by the municipalities, right, by the
Yeah.
building code.
Yeah.
So I would just say that the 40-60, if it's in the building code, we're not going to challenge that. But the 90 should not apply in my mind.
Okay, Danny, or
Can I make
Maureen?
a suggestion? Could we get the bylaw on which bylaw? The secondary suite bylaw, because it would be helpful, I think, for
Even
us to
like
see.
I think the land use bylaw is clearer, just that section of it.
The
it's-
land use bylaw is
yeah,
clearer?
Yeah.
Okay, so, section
So
There it is.
yeah.
there.
And then just the consolidated one, and then it's
Okay.
section 3.54.
So does anybody object to the suggestion of removing the 40% limit? Because again, I mean, I just think, let's remove it, if it doesn't actually change anything, why it's an arbitrary thing, and just make people, I think our suggestion was just make people aware that there are code implications if you go over 40-60.
Well,
Yeah,
the
so-
building code can change too, right? And
Yeah. So like I know there are places
Yeah.
where people have built like they're essentially a 900 square foot footprint, right? And the lower floor and the top floor.
Yeah.
And so we would say, well, that's not allowed if they came now for a permit or something. We'd say,
Yeah.
well, that's not allowed as a secondary suite because they're each 50% of the
Yeah.
floor area, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of arbitrary.
So it does seem arbitrary to me. So
Yeah.
if we don't object as a single line item, and then what I'd like to do, Frits, is yours is of the maximum square meters, let like a separate line item.
Yes.
So if we for now say the 40% limit, we recommend to remove it, nobody objects, great. Now let's talk about the 90 square meter limit of floor space, the secondary suite.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically the same discussion.
Well, I mean, I know they're related, but I don't think they're exactly the same, because, like say somebody could build a 900 square foot up and down or side by side or whatever, and they might not want one half to be bigger than the other, they just want them to be the same, and then one's primary. So why should we restrict that? Like, who cares, right? Like, so they can be 50-50, it can be
Yeah.
whatever we want. So let's just take away that 40%, it's not relevant.
Yeah.
And then, but the 90 square meter limit is I think a different discussion, so,
But, so my question is, why is it a different discussion? Because.
well, just a different line
It's
item. Like, I don't think they're
limiting, yeah.
tied, I don't think they're, I don't think one without the other, do you know what I mean? So like, I think we can make them as separate recommendations and they're not dependent on each other. Does
Well,
that
you
make
know,
sense?
what the other one would say is that it can be 40-60 with the lowest of the two. That's what the bylaw would say. It is still restricted by the 90 square meters.
Yes.
But then actually then the 40-60 becomes irrelevant.
Right,
You know, so, and if
okay.
you can live in one or the other part anyway, so it is, I think both of them should go. This is,
Yeah, so let's, okay, so, but I'm just saying, I don't think they need to be, anyways, let's
yeah,
not.
that's fine,
let's
that's
not.
fine. Yeah,
Okay.
however you want to.
So let's look at what we're doing. So where's the detached secondary suite, number 4, detached secondary suite can be larger. So go up to 115, and then number 6, a secondary suite shall not be maximum 90. So Daniel, what's kind of staff's position on this? Is there a background or a reason, or is?
I mean, that 90 square meters again is essentially BC building code. Like I pulled up, this is a 2013 bulletin on suites and secondary suites. So they say, well, a suite can be in a building, but a secondary suite is a specific type of suite. It's an additional dwelling unit within a building which has all of the following characteristics. So total floor space not more than 90 square meters, floor space not more than 40%. It's located in a residential building with only one other dwelling unit, and it's in a building with a single real estate entity. And so it says that if it meets those, you get to go under certain relaxations from normal code requirements. So if we said, well, you could be 50-50, it doesn't matter, you would then trigger this and we'd say, okay, you're no longer a secondary suite in the BC building code. You don't get the relaxations, you have to meet
Yeah.
whatever the full things are for a
What would you
code.
be if you no
You'd just be a
longer
suite.
accepted?
You'd be,
Just a suite.
yeah. So it'd be like separate dwelling units within a building, as opposed to saying, well, in a secondary suite, I get to have lesser
So
things
it
about like
would
fire
have more
separation.
rigorous fire separation requirements, which if you're building new, wouldn't be that big a
Yeah.
deal, but if you were renovating and retrofitting, might
Yeah, so-
be a big deal.
If that would be stated in the BC, in the zoning bylaw, right? That you make people aware that you have to basically meet the requirements of a duplex, right? Which is more,
Yeah.
it's not a big requirement.
And
by
I
the way.
think, and I think it could be in an information bulletin or something, I don't know where it would be
Yeah.
stated, but exactly, you would just make it clear to people that if you meet the building code requirements of 40%, 90 square meters, you can use those. If you do
Yes.
not, you must meet, full building code.
Right.
So I agree, like, is everybody else on the committee in agreement? Because we maybe don't have to talk about this too much more, that we should remove
Yeah,
the
because
maximum?
what I also like about Bowen doing that is that if all housing all over BC is restricted by the building code,
Mhm.
right? Well, it isn't necessary, people just have to put on a little bit more drywall, right? And be a bit more careful, which is safer anyway, then we should just say, yeah, we can take out the 90 square meters, we can take out the 40-60, we just make people aware that they run into different requirements, and it is not that demanding. In my mind, it's
No,
almost
agreed.
like,
So,
if
and
I
then
go to
that's
my
their,
place, I would do it anyway.
them and their designer's responsibility. Now, are we saying we take out the limit altogether, or do we up it, or is that, like, because this is sort of the,
But,
and I guess I'm trying to put we're the housing committee, so we're recommending, we're wanting more housing opportunities to come up, we're wanting more diverse housing. does it make sense to remove the limit entirely, or does it make sense to up the limit? Or, and we don't have to say it, we can just make a recommendation that the limit should be either removed or increased to allow more flexibility.
What would be the harmful consequences to the community of removing the limits?
But in my mind, we have to recommend that they would be removed. Then when it goes to council, there's somebody like Danielle and there's the councillors who have a discussion.
Yeah.
But our recommendation is it's in the way of providing more affordable and bigger variety of housing. It's just that simple from my point of view.
Then I would say
Okay.
remove them.
Yeah, I think I'm probably in agreement with that. Any other thoughts?
But I have one more thought.
Yeah.
It says that you can have one secondary suite. Now, okay, so the secondary suite gets bigger and bigger. It now becomes a 2-bedroom, it's a 3-bedroom, whatever, right? But in some areas, I thought there should be a little bit more of a neighborhood focus on what type of secondary suites are desirable. And there's 2 items there. One of them is that, for instance, if you're in the cove and there would be a conclusion that it really needs more smaller suites, right? Now a small suite can be 500 square feet, but maybe that's half of 90 square meters, which is 1,000 square feet. So why can't you have 2 smaller suites that even could have met the 90 square meters? You know what I mean? So the idea that or you say, well, no, we don't care, we just want the biggest ones anyway for families. But the island is not one island with the same requirements, right? So maybe for a family that has more kids, maybe they like to live at a bit more distance with a bit more room to play for the kids, or maybe they like to be in the park, I don't know. But the idea that it's restricted to 1, that maybe you can say from up to 2. You can say from maybe up to 20, but that's maybe something that the council says, well, it's just not feasible. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And then there's the attached and detached, which I'm not sure if you got into that, because I
We
think
haven't yet.
if a detached suite gets bigger and bigger and is planted right beside the neighbors, that's going to be an issue. So for instance, if you say the secondary suite that's in the home, right, we basically say lift the limitations because the house is going to be a certain size anyway, right? But if the detached secondary suite has more impact on neighbors, it has more impact on massing, it takes more garden space away, so I can see that being a much bigger issue. So maybe we say for now, maybe leave the 90 square meters as a maximum for the detached, and that can maybe be discussed for further consideration or something like that.
Yeah, or it's 115 or something for the detached.
Yeah, it's feet, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the idea of having 2 small suites, because that's a single person early in the workforce.
Yeah, so you can set the limit at 2, maybe, to be more careful. So you have to be more careful about the number of suites and about it being attached to detached.
So, Daniel, do you see any red flags with making that? So we could, again, we don't have to come up with the answers, right? We can, as a housing committee, say, we think staff and council should consider allowing X. Because I think you'd have to, because I was just, like Allison kind of put it, like what are the negative consequences or where does it go? And yeah, I can see you would want some sort of limit on it though, because if you start saying, oh sure, you can have up to 2, and we've taken away the size limitation, all of a sudden you can get like a 3,000 square foot house with 1,000 square foot here and 1,000, you know what I mean? So yeah, I think it would need more thought and everything, but maybe the suggestion that we make is simply consider allowing or recommend 2 small suites in the space of 1 with some sort of limits placed on it or something like
Yeah,
that.
and if you put a limit on the size of the second suite, whatever, right? It needs discussion, but like the idea is to.
I'm certainly seeing it being very useful for families where they have large plot of land and the children can't afford to to buy here.
Yeah.
So they can build a couple of places if they have a 10-acre lot or whatever. Even if it's a smaller one, would be great. I have a question which I'm not sure if it's related, but I think it is, which is where our goal is that we provide more rental opportunities, right, to the community and long-term rental
I
specifically.
think affordable housing in general,
All right, let's
but
just
yes,
say
that's one
affordable.
component is rental.
Housing. Bottom line, this is not affordable housing,
Right.
although that may be our focus at
Yes.
this point.
Right,
Okay.
no, agreed,
Housing
that's a good
diversity.
thing, and
It's
yeah,
true.
housing diversity, that's.
Housing diversity, because
Yes.
we have plenty expensive houses.
Single family houses.
Single family houses, we have lots. What we don't have is the diversity housing, and I would say the lower income housing.
Middle income as well.
Sorry, middle income,
as
sure.
well.
Sure. How can we encourage that people who create new buildings on their site use it for long-term rental rather than income with Airbnb? And I've been thinking about this
Yeah.
a lot over the summer. I was in Edinburgh where they have a huge problem with Airbnb
Yeah.
or any of those. And something that's starting to be used in different places is a lottery, where we as a council, or the council, decide there will be a certain number of Airbnbs allowed in a year. And on a particular date, people are allowed to register their Airbnb, and it's basically first come, first served. And then after that, you're out of luck.
Mm.
There is an ongoing short-term rental regulation development right now. Emma Chow will be coming back to council probably within the next 2 months or so,
I know, I think she's scheduled for the 30th.
the 30th, with draft regulations. So that is in the works, and it's been going on for probably 6 to 8 months. There's been community consultation and so forth. And she has looked at the approaches that have been taken in other communities. The lottery idea, I don't think, has risen to prominence in her thinking, but it would be a potential tool that could be used. I don't know at this point whether she would consider it appropriate on Bowen, and I don't know whether I would either.
Right.
I have a question for Daniel. In a lot of municipalities, secondary suites, and particularly detached secondary suites, is a conditional use. And I'm always a bit worried about that because it takes lots of time, money, uncertainty to get through these processes. In Vancouver it is, for instance, it's to the point that you now actually have to make a separate building permit application for a detached secondary suite, which is a layman house. And that process takes much longer than getting a building permit for the house itself, because it's conditional. And
What do you mean by conditional?
conditional means that there are subjective criteria used, which is overshadowing of the neighbors. It is impact on neighbors from maybe from your windows and stuff like that. And Vancouver originally had everything conditional, and then they decided that the biggest problem with detached secondary suites is the second story, because people look straight back into the houses from the neighbors. So, and then they designed their process to deal with that. They did a few things that I personally don't like. They tried to design it that it's the most likely that you rent it out. So what they're saying is they don't want too many windows facing your own house, because then it's less likely that you rent it out. It's more likely that you use it for your kids or for a hobby room or whatever. So, but the process is long and it tends to slow down everything, right? So I'm not in favor of it, but I just want to know from Danielle to which degree, in your mind, with secondary suites, for instance, if you say go from 1 to 2, would you make the second one conditional or does it stay outright? From a detached secondary home, right? That's the same question.
So right now, for detached secondary suites, we have a development permit area with fairly weak guidelines, I would say. Like they're big picture. They're like, you can't block your neighbor's view and you can't overshadow your neighbor's stuff. And then you're exempt if you're far enough from a property line, or so probably more of the detached secondary suites manage to get exempt because they're on big properties and they can be far enough away, they don't even need it at all. And it's just,
Right.
they don't even need the development permit. I think if we were to look at allowing them on smaller sites, then we would be looking at more restrictive development permit guidelines, even to the point where it's like, well, some people maybe your lot is big enough, but you actually can't build one, and that and the trade-off essentially allowing them in more, like allowing them in the loop, say like lots that size. Then you start to say, okay, but we're very restrictive in what you can actually do, and I think that would be the trade-off we would do.
So, yeah, I'm wondering, because what we have, the equivalent of what we have instead of conditional and,
Yeah.
whatever, is the DP process, right?
Yeah.
It's an extra layer of subjectivity that allows for that. So actually, one thing that came to my mind as we were talking about it is if we are recommending to remove the square foot or the square meter limit on those sizes, but perhaps you have to have a DP if you're going with this size. Something along
What's
those
a
lines.
DP?
A development permit. Okay. So it means that it goes through planning. Whereas if, for example, you wanted to stick to those limits, you could go straight to a building permit. Again, are we then encouraging that and not encouraging more diverse options? But, I mean, on Bowen, the development permit process isn't totally onerous. It's not like City of Vancouver. It takes months and months and months, but, it is an extra layer.
I find that the whole discussion about secondary suites, detached or attached, because now the City of Vancouver allows duplexes in all single-family zones. What I think is actually positive about what the City of Vancouver is doing is that the laneway house concept, in my mind, didn't make any sense. It fills up all these yards with buildings, and it takes away from the single-family concept. Neighborhoods that are treed and look, spacious, start to be filled in with stuff that's going to be torn down one day because the density is too low anyway, right? But what I like about the duplexes is that what the City of Vancouver did, and maybe we can think about something like that, there's the same maximum house size, building size, the same maximum building size, but you can split it any way you want in two stratas. It does a few things. First of all, it leaves those gardens empty. Secondly, now you have two buyers. You don't have one person that has to invest more and more and has more capital in their home while the other people are renting, right? So you put something, you allow more people to buy something that's smaller, And attached doesn't mean that it has to be one big block. The bigger lot attached can just mean, you attach them with the two garages or something, but you know what I mean? I'm saying is that I find that if the secondary suites are important, but at a certain point, you have to say, is it actually right that we have all that single-family zoning? And do you create something that is better, that a lot of people are waiting for? And again, it doesn't have to be blanket over the whole island. There may be certain neighborhoods where it's appropriate. Daniel, you have all kinds of things. Do you have an opinion about that?
Well, so we allowed essentially the duplex zoning at the top of Kate's Hill.
Yes.
Right, those 4 lots.
Yeah.
As like a model. So, that's in essence to do what City of Vancouver did, we expand that zoning.
Right.
So it could be, because I don't think that that's directly related to this secondary suite bylaw review, but I think we should include it we could include it as an additional consideration that we would say staff and council should look at maybe creating, we don't have a zoning that's duplex, do we? That was that was a duplex zoning, it wasn't a comprehensive development, it was a duplex.
What it is its own variation of the Kate's Hill zone.
Okay.
But in doing that, we created the definition.
Okay, so you created the definition. So maybe in whatever way that is, that you look at creating a duplex zone and look at appropriate areas on Bowen where that might be it might be good to implement that. Is that kind of what you're thinking, Frits?
Well, it could be in the intro actually, because if council totally focuses on secondary suites, then maybe they know there's something else out there that may be a good idea, but they at least know that there's another vehicle available, and also if they also see it a bit more neighborhood based, that it does make a difference.
Neighborhood based. So in certain neighborhoods, you think it would
But
be more appropriate?
I think Danielle was already saying that if you have a huge parcel inland, right, and you put a few little suites on it, and it's super cute in the landscape because it looks like an old barn with a goat in front of it. Then and these people are happy and have a place to live and all that. Then what's wrong with that?
Well, no, agreed, and I think that's where we've talked about a cluster housing zoning as well, right? And that would be kind of along the same lines of allowing in certain areas.
But cluster zoning, in my mind, that sounds different than allowing detached secondary buildings in little clusters on larger properties. These are two different things. Cluster zoning, in my mind, if you'd say that, means single-family homes that are clustered. In actually read the OCP, you'll be surprised what they mean by cluster zoning. That has to change. They mean,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know what it means,
Yeah,
right?
we've talked about
So
it before,
the
I
means
think,
is
yeah.
crazy, right?
They mean essentially whatever is it Fairweather strata like on the south coast, where it's like this giant barrelland strata where they're all in little lots along the bottom and they have a giant common property. That would be ROCP cluster zoning.
So it's basically,
Yeah.
it's single-family lots arranged differently.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah, so I think that's not what we're suggesting by like the clustered zoning, pocket neighborhood zoning. It's more of a
Yeah,
infill,
so maybe it should be a
strata, diverse opportunity.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily meant to be small lot.
Yeah, it's only with
So we have
terms
to
and
expand on that.
definitions, so you won't
Okay.
get confused.
And there are examples of this sort of clustered zoning
Is
from other
there-
municipalities.
On point 5 there, asking about the details, it has to be 0.36 hectares before you can have a detached secondary suite. What's the reason behind that?
So, well, that's one of our suggestions, is to remove that. So
Yeah.
if, in our list, I think number 4, I'm sorry, I'm editing it as I go here, the lot size limit, so
You're
removing that.
editing this as we go.
Sorry?
You're editing
I
this.
am, I'm editing it as we go.
Okay, good.
So removing the lot size limit is one of our next points. And again, that might come, sorry, I'm repeating myself, but we don't have to have all the answers, but we recommend removing the lot size limit and revising the DP guidelines to go along with that. So it might be that certain lot sizes need to have a DP, or certain neighborhoods like Deep Bay or whatever,
Yeah.
right? Because there's a lot of things going on there, like you've got septic, you've got neighbors, you've got all sorts of setbacks. Or, you look at neighborhoods, like I know I've done a bit of work down Eagle Cliff where there's like encroachments and crazy,
Yeah.
like people don't have proper setbacks because it's just such an old neighborhood. So, I think that could be addressed through a DP process. Does anybody object to that? So the line is remove lot size limit and then revise the DP guidelines to suit.
I think also one of the purposes of the development permit when you start a new program is that it's tested,
Yeah.
and then at a certain point maybe the DPs are less important and can become more outright, right?
Mhm.
But it eases it into the neighborhood.
Yeah, yeah, and I think also it eases it for people to know that it's not just a blanket, oh, anybody can just go apply for it. It's like, no, there is a little bit of an extra layer of due diligence and review of these small lots, if that's what we're suggesting. So yeah, so if everybody's in agreement with that, great. So, and I'm gonna say, okay, same thing for the maximum size, removing that it would be revising the DP requirements to suit that, to allow a bit of oversight. Then number 4 on our list here, allow both attached and detached on certain lot sizes, question mark. Like that was something else that came up in our discussion.
Well, if you go into the more than one secondary suite, yeah,
Yeah, so maybe that's part of that
it's
discussion.
kind of the same, right?
Okay, yeah, exactly. So, consider allowing both or two smaller spaces.
I think another recommendation that we had, maybe in your point 1 to 7, I don't know, is that we thought that building permits designed for all single-family homes would be secondary suite ready. Because unfortunately, most houses that have been built up to date are not secondary suite ready.
It's not on the list.
It's not on the list. Okay, so let's add that in here if we want to talk about that.
What does that mean?
That means you design a house that as you go through your whole lifetime using that house and situations change, part of that house could easily switch to a secondary suite if you want to. There's no requirement. So for
Is
instance,
that
if a
like
house...
plumbing downstairs or?
No, of course, typically people think about basements, right? But then it doesn't have to be in the basement. You can design your house that maybe one time the nice thing is that if you have, for instance, kids one time, they can use that. And it's not fully part of the house. Or it can be a caregiver. Or you can rent it out. Or you can use it as Airbnb. I mean, you create all these possibilities. You can also use it as your media room or your home office. You know? So there's no
sorry,
restrictions on how you
So
use it.
you're saying that we make it mandatory for
Yes.
all new houses to have it?
Yes,
Or
and
would
it's-
we, could we offer, like, say, offer an incentive of some kind, or I don't know, I'm
I'm
just,
all in favor of that, but
Yeah.
if you have, if you say, look, it's so easy to do because it's just making part of your house, design it in a way that you keep the future in mind, right? That's all it is really. But then if you say people need an incentive for it, I'm all in favor of that as long as it's outright. People always go for incentives.
yeah,
it's
I'm
not-
thinking more of an incentive, because again, although I don't disagree with you in principle, I also am a little bit afraid of making people do something. Like if somebody just wants to build a nice modest little cabin because they have this property, to sort of force them to build like if somebody just wants to build a modest 1,200 square foot.
That they don't need to, I agree with you.
Yeah, so that's why I wouldn't want to force them to do it. So how do we word it to encourage or incentivize? Maybe that's the wording we could use.
Yes,
So find a way to encourage and incentivize.
yes.
What
Okay.
sort of cost would preparing a home to be secondary suite
Well,
would be to
I
the
don't
original
really-
builder?
To be honest, I don't think that much, but you know what's nice about it's the incentive that like there's a lot of zones that have kind of split zoning, right? There's 2 levels of zoning, and I find it's a huge tool for the municipality to use. And for instance, if that's what you want, and you give people 10% more floor space, good chance to go for it, right? Then if a house is a little bit bigger or smaller, it's not if you make a house 10% bigger that it's 10% more expensive. It's maybe 5% more expensive. So but for it's the same discussion as the secondary suite discussion. That at a certain point, you may design the part of the house that you have your sound separations, you have your fire separations, which is all basically drywall. You know, and it's like not having holes all over the place. So it's not a big deal, but if you incent, I think the idea that it's to give the incentives for it is good, right? And then if it's presented that this is what you need to do, like a summary from the building bylaw, then I think most people will actually say, yeah, it makes total sense. Let's go for it.
I wonder if that suggestion belongs in the running list that we've got on page 8 of our council agenda. There's a list of recommendations for the report to council, because it's a broader recommendation than
Yeah.
just simply addressing the revision
Yeah.
to the secondary suites bylaw. And that report might go forward at the same time as the revision to the secondary suite.
Okay.
But, okay, so then,
So sorry, Brian, what were you thinking? So we would add in there about encouraging
incentivizing and or incentivizing all the builds to be secondary suite ready.
Yeah. It's probably good investment anyway.
I'm sorry?
So,
It's probably a really good investment too.
Yeah,
oh, I think
If you
so.
put the house
yeah.
on the market,
Yeah.
a lot of people will be looking for something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah,
I wish.
For
my
whatever
house would
family,
be
yeah, there
put
you go,
together
right?
that way.
yeah, well, and I mean, I'm doing a renovation, not on Bowen, somewhere else, and that's exactly what we're doing. They need a big family house right now,
Yeah.
but in 10 or 15 years, all the kids are gonna be gone, so we're creating a suite, and we're actually making it flexible, so it could be a 1 or a 2 bedroom, or a little studio.
Yeah, very
So
good.
you can kind of have doors and,
Yeah.
but we have putting all the drywall, because right now it's a blank slate, so we're putting all the drywall and kind of all the things we need to do,
Yeah.
so that they can have that flexibility as life goes on,
So
right?
they're
So-
living houses. is
Yeah,
what
yeah,
they-
and they can adapt in the future and, yeah. So, okay, so that belongs here. So do you think that belongs on this list and we take it off of the secondary suite bylaw? Because it's not strictly to do with secondary suites, is it?
I think it's not to
Not
do
to
with the
that, okay.
secondary suites in terms of the bylaw,
Okay, so I'm just gonna,
So I've added it to the list.
okay, great,
but that's what I think.
I'm dating it.
okay. So this is other recommendations. Okay, so if we go back to our list, I think that's great, yeah, let's, and I think, yeah, we could aim, because we haven't got that many on the list, but.
No, it's number 3.
Yeah, it's number 3, so if either today or next meeting, we could add that in, and I think we make it either 2 little reports or 1 report in 2 sections, and that can go to council at the same time, would be great. Okay, so back to our original one, so I think we've addressed allow both attached and detached. I've got consider allowing both attached and detached or 2 smaller suites within one property. And then the idea being maybe there's certain size limits, sort of question mark, and maybe it's controlled through a DP process.
Yep.
Yeah.
Then you can ask his staff to give their opinions, right?
Yeah. And again, all we're doing is writing, and I like that we said, and I think Allison said it, and I'm gonna put at the beginning, kind of a preamble. Our goal is to provide more diverse housing options for the island
Yeah.
with an emphasis on lower and middle income households. So that's the lens
Yes.
that we're coming through. And we're simply,
Yeah.
as the housing committee, making these recommendations,
Yes.
and staff and council can do with them as they will. But these are ours as this committee, our voice. That's
Exactly.
what we're trying to get here. So I think that's good to just keep
Reiterate.
Yeah, reiterate, thank you. So, we're down to parking. So parking reductions and dedicated parking. So, number 5, parking reduction close to Cove. I think that was just a, consider parking reductions if it's within walking distance of the Cove, something like that.
I thought also this per neighborhood, like in general, right? I mean, Cove being one of them. Like per neighborhood, like it's just like the idea that each neighborhood has a parking issue is just not true. If you have a 10-acre lot, there is no parking issue at all, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just saying is that maybe, what I like about that is that people actually focus on where it may be an issue.
Yeah, so could we be a little specific? Could we say if it's within approximately 500 meters of walking distance
don't know
of
if
the
that's
Cove?
really-
Or do we want to be, if it's within walking distance of the Cove, consider a parking relaxation?
I'll tell you what I don't like about that, because this goes back to something that we're going to discuss a little bit later, which is really the whole official community plan and the 2019 plan from the council. It is that I think it's untrue that the only place where people look for that type of housing is in the Cove. I just don't believe it.
Okay. Or on transit routes?
For instance.
Is that something we could say?
Mm-hmm.
Just to introduce that idea, I'm totally in favor of that.
Okay, so, and yeah, exactly, it's an idea, right? We're just saying, consider a parking reduction. I'm thinking, so if there's somebody who has an appropriate site in Deep Bay and they can make it work because they've got a really modest little house and they want to build something
Yes.
else, but they just can't fit the parking,
Yeah.
is
I
that
think-
something that we should be allowed to be considered? Because right now, it's
Yeah.
like mandatory. You have no choice, you have to have parking on your site.
Yes.
Whereas if we say, consider a relaxation, because we're trying to get them in on smaller lots, and that would be a perfect spot for it, because it's walking to everything, or, so
You
that's
said
what I'm getting at.
relaxation, right? You mean that it's the DP?
And it could be through a DP process, and again, I don't wanna kind of keep writing that everywhere, but we're just saying, consider a parking reduction.
Yeah.
I have a query about that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's wise. I mean, much as I would normally be in favor of relaxing rules, while the person who actually builds it might say, I don't need a car, I'm not going to use a car, somewhere down the road, someone is going to have a car. And if they don't have a parking spot in their lot, especially I'm thinking a place like Deep Bay, if it's a 10-acre lot,
Yep.
no issue.
Yeah.
But if it's Deep Bay, all those cars will end up on the road,
Yeah.
and it's dangerous.
Yeah.
And a child someday is going to hit it. So I would speak in favor of having a driveway still. That's my.
So, but again, do we want to, it's a consider a parking relaxation, it's not a complete lifting of it. I guess what I'm thinking is it gives a little more freedom, but
For me, it
I
would
hear
be-
what you're saying.
It would be a matter of what area is it in?
Yeah.
How much space is there? If it was Deep Bay, I'd say no.
You know what you could maybe do too, is that parking requirements assume that you provide a parking stall, right? And that means that it has a certain size. Well, I kind of think that on this island, half sizes are, could be. If you want to encourage smaller electric vehicles to swarm over this island, then you say from 1.5 parking stalls, 1.6. Because what it does, it actually makes it much easier to provide that second stall. There's another thing that makes a huge difference. A parking stall that's tandem is never counted. So if you have 2 cars behind the stall, it's not counted. Right? Behind our office, we have 3 parking stalls, but they're always parked 10.
Right.
And it's never an issue.
Yes, yes.
But I'm just saying is that the smaller parking stall, because the size is smaller, it actually makes a big difference. The other thing is, are you allowed to park in the front yard or not? Like in most municipalities, parking in the front yard are not counted. Are they counted?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just require on the property, we have to allow tandem spaces.
So no, see, so then there's a setback that your house has to be from the street anyway,
Yeah.
and there's your parking stall. A lot of municipalities have a restriction in the driveway, so the access that you can have to the road is normally 14 feet or so. Do we have that in Bowen or not? Or can we just park like somebody does on Mills Road, just a freaking pool without their property?
So the parking space has to be on the property.
And you can have limited, unlimited access.
No, the
There's a
driveway
limit,
access permit,
6
there's a limit,
meters or
yeah,
something,
6
isn't
meters
it?
in width.
6 meters, and 6
Yeah.
meters you can get 2 cars.
Yeah.
So you can also get 2 cars in the front yard. That's the
So anyways, do
So
we
you can
want to,
you can actually, you don't have to relax it, but you can always get 2 parking stalls in the front yard.
but not everybody can,
Not everybody can.
right?
I guess the point is, if we bump it up from the details, the point is that if we're too strict with parking, we're going to inhibit the potential
Yes.
for additional secondary suites. So the details, I think, are going to have to get worked out. But just that principle.
It's a principle of, can we make it easier?
Yeah.
Can we, make it flexible? And maybe there's a rule on it, and I do agree with what you're saying, because then the next one we have is parking dedicated for tenant use, so it's like, they're kind of counteractive
I
there.
think what we can recommend is that small stalls are counted as a stall,
Okay,
because it actually really makes a difference in small lots. You're looking for every foot makes a difference.
Mhm. It's
So-
an interesting point.
Right now we allow,
yeah, because it's, I
Good
think
to have-
small stalls
good
are
to
only
have
like a certain
Danielle here,
percentage.
you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Really good.
With,
Keeps
no.
working
so
with
we allow a compact car size, but up to 35% of the total required can be reduced in size.
Yeah, maybe change that a bit.
So, yeah, because if it was 50% and if you had to do an extra one for your suite, then it could be a compact size.
Where do you find
Yeah.
it? Outstanding.
Okay.
No.
So I think I'll put that in, so I've got consider parking reduction if close to Cove or on transit route. And maybe I'll just put that as a suggestion, i.e. if close to transit or on transit route or Cove. And then as a secondary, so a DP process, consider the neighborhood parking needs, which I think is Allison what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Because agreed, like you might just say in Deep Bay, forget it, because we cannot have any more street parking, or, and I'm just throwing out that like maybe there's some way that you make the owner sign and say, you know, your tenant can have a car, like I don't know how you enforce that, but, you know, but there is a way of, you know, you can advertise it in that, you know, there's just no parking and no parking street. Again, I don't know how you enforce that, but, that's a possibility, right? So, consider the neighborhood parking needs, and then consider compact car size, for a stall. And then maybe on part of, and then it's sort of a separate point about parking, so maybe, where included, that a space is dedicated for the tenant. Is that kind of, because I think what, that came from a discussion of, there was a spot on the property, but then the landlord didn't allow the tenant to use it or something. So I don't know how we phrase that.
Did you get that thing from what Danielle just said about specifically relax, change that to 50%? Can you say that to?
Oh, do you want me, do you think that's how we do it? That we
Yeah.
need to change that?
Yeah.
I
Parking
mean, that would
regulation?
change it, that would say, like if it said 50%, then it would say, okay, you have to have 2 spaces for the suite, but then you could, one of them could be smaller.
And sorry, is that on here?
No, it's in our
It's-
parking section.
See, I'm a little hesitant, I don't think I wanna change the parking section, because then that applies to everything, right?
Mhm.
So if you build a new artisan square, it means you can have 50% compact space, like,
Yeah.
I'd be really reticent to do
Well,
that.
Yeah, let's put it
Can
in
this
there.
override that? Can this say parking?
Just by its section.
Yeah.
It can, yeah.
It can. So that's what I would prefer, that, because it's very specific to what we're talking about in terms of secondary suites.
Okay, but then, fine, but then say that 50% of the cars can be small cars.
Yeah, so consider compact car size stalls overriding parking bylaw. And you're saying 50%?
Yeah. It really is the answer, because then you can put in one small stall
Yeah,
if you need
yeah,
to.
okay. But we don't want both of them to be small stalls?
No.
Okay.
You might need a truck and a smart car.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
No,
yep,
it's-
I'm kind of indifferent about the whole, like about, yeah, one or the other. So consider compact car size stall overriding the parking bylaw of 50%, I'm gonna just, yeah, okay. And so what I'm gonna do, I'll type these notes up and make it a little clearer, and then I will email it out to the committee this month. And then the IDB hopefully will ratify it, or whatever the term is, at the next meeting, and that will be the official thing to
Yeah.
vote. So I'm just making these notes, and you guys can
Yeah.
give me feedback on the wording if there's anything specific. Maureen?
So, I'm kind of stuck on this, and if you could tolerate me just going through it bit by bit.
Yeah.
So, we are essentially eliminating one and saying that more than one accessory residential use may be permitted on the lot. Is that correct?
We haven't talked about that yet, that's actually in our next thing, but,
But we
oh,
did
sorry,
talk about
but we
that.
have said, we've said consider allowing both attached and detached or two smaller suites within
Right.
one property. We
Right.
haven't addressed two accessory buildings, or,
That would in essence
I thought
we
we
would be
did.
saying not more than two, right? Would be-
No, okay, for Allison, okay?
Yeah.
Accessory building doesn't have to be a secondary.
oh, sorry,
suite.
no, it says one
So
accessory
accessory
building-
residential use, I'm mixing up the words, I'm
Okay,
not
so
sure that.
a detached garage is an accessory building,
Okay,
a barn is an accessory building, you see
got
what I
it,
mean?
yes.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So like we said that, okay, go back to the secondary suite first, detached, like how many can you have?
It says not more than one accessory residential use shall be permitted.
So an accessory residential use is just a secondary suite or a detached secondary.
Okay,
suite.
so that we have addressed that.
We have addressed
Yeah.
that, okay.
Okay,
But maybe, I don't think the question came up when Danielle was saying, right, that if you have a large property, can you have more than one detached secondary suite? Because it would provide staff housing maybe, or because the property is so large, it has minimum impact on the neighborhood.
so,
Which we've shown in your drawings of,
Okay.
you took us through 2-3 months ago.
mhm.
Oh, yeah,
How small
that's all.
the
Yeah,
impact
yeah,
was.
I'm just waiting to kind of make it a little bit easier to understand for people that are drawing and make sure that there's no
So-
mistakes. in it.
So
That's a
if
separate thing.
So if I could just continue on,
Yes.
what I want to do is I want to see the extent to which our discussion has actually addressed the language of the bylaw.
Yep.
So two, in addition to the parking requirements, so we're modifying that as well, and we're talking about a variation on the parking requirement.
Yeah.
With three, we're saying, no, you could have B&B or commercial guest
Yeah,
accommodation.
just do it, remove that.
So we've changed that.
Yeah.
So we've changed the first, the second, and the third.
Mhm.
For a detached secondary suite shall not exceed. It sounds as though we're staying with that, because we were making a distinction between
Not necessarily the 65
attached
though, right?
and, sorry?
Not necessarily the 65.
No.
That's the minimum, right? You're always allowed 65 square meters, is that correct?
Yeah, you're actually, I mean, you end up being allowed more because of the, essentially if you're at an acre, you're allowed 90 square meters, and if you're
Right.
at 2 acres, you're allowed that. So your minimum, if you're 0.36, you're sort of at like 80 square meters maybe.
Okay.
So what I've got from our notes from what we discussed today was to essentially remove the maximum size. And I've got a note, still a single real estate entity, because I think that's kind of an important distinction of what we're talking about. So, but remove the maximum size. Oh, no, that's.
No.
In attached, like in the building, okay? But in detached, we had a different,
Yeah, and
Okay.
that's new. That's a new piece in this bylaw,
Okay.
where we are removing that limitation, and that was related to all the discussion of the detached introduce all the complications of proximity to the neighbor and the landscaping
Yeah.
Yeah.
and so on. So there are two bits there. that need
Okay,
to
so
be-
two separate things. So
Yeah.
let's address this one first, number 4. A detached secondary suite shall not exceed, that's thing. Are we saying we're removing that?
I
'Cause that was
thought-
my understanding.
I thought we were saying we were keeping that.
I think we keep that because it's correct, like the detached, there's far more issues in the detached ones. So we say we want to make it easier to be more flexible in the home itself, in the attached.
Okay, so nobody has any objections to this size limit on the detached secondary suites? I don't feel strongly
I
about
think you have
it.
to be really careful there, because if you say you take that away and you can put 50% of the size of your house, you're basically building 2 houses on it.
Yeah, exactly.
It will
So
be
that's-
huge
this is what
subdivision,
we're,
right?
yeah.
So it's
Agreed.
better to.
So let's leave that, so
Yeah.
keep that one. Good, thank you for
And-
separating this. I'm trying to follow the numbers now. So number 5, the minimum lot size. So we're gonna take
We're
that.
talking about taking that out.
We're talking about removing lot size and then revising the DP guidelines to suit. Yeah?
Is that a place to put in, consider the application within, to respect to the neighbourhood it is being viewed for, so that then something applied for in old Blue Water is going to be very different than somewhere being applied for in a much broader 10-acre lot along Sunset Road.
So
So
it's a real question for Danielle, actually.
Yeah, and I think that's where
Can you
we've
actually
been a
do that?
bit vague about, revise the
But-
DP
Yeah.
guidelines to suit, so it's giving them the latitude, so I don't know if we wanna be specific, but we can say consider the neighborhood.
But I think it's healthy for us to say that housing should be looked at for the neighbourhood. So it's not an island-wide, one stamp
Okay.
fits all.
Okay,
It's looked at in with respect to how that part of the island has traditionally lived.
So Danielle, but I think, sorry, Danielle, but you can maybe respond to is that to which degree can the municipality through zoning have design guidelines that affect aesthetics? I mean, the city of
Yeah.
Vancouver does it.
We can for intensive residential development, which is what we've classified the detached secondary suites as. So we have development permit guidelines for the detached secondary suite.
Okay.
Um,
So for the detached, can you say that again? So for the detached
secondary suites, yeah.
secondary suites, you can do it.
We can do development permit guidelines. I mean, more, I think what Daniel's talking about a little bit is we can also zone it like by neighborhood potentially,
Right.
right? So you can just draw the map and you say, okay, Blue Water, you don't get them,
Or
Or
there's
whatever the
different,
case
there's
may be.
different aesthetics requirements, right? It's
yeah,
really
that would
difficult
probably be
with
part of
the-
the same DP guidelines. I think you'd have the guidelines for everything, and then you'd say, okay, in this area, you're following these guidelines or something.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know, instead we do it more by lot size, so it's more generic. And you'd say, okay, if you're over 10 acres, you've got, these more limited stuff, and as you get smaller in lot size, and you enter the, like Blue Water or the Loop or whatever, where there's smaller areas to install bathe.
Yeah.
You're saying, okay, now you're trying to trigger more intensive
Yeah.
guidelines.
and it might be, it might not be something you do all in advance, because that's quite a lot of work. It might be like on this case by case basis, you start to develop, as one comes from Tunstall Bay, as one comes from,
I think you would need them,
you'd need them up front.
like if we rezoned it and said, okay, there's no minimum lot size, we'd have to add that same bylaw, say, and these are the guidelines that come with it.
For each neighborhood,
For the whole change, yeah.
yeah.
But are they, it's that subjective part that
Yeah, that's what I'm
that is
worried
really
about.
difficult to deal
Yeah.
with. If you have something you can kind of measure or judge, I mean, does a window look straight into the neighborhood, that you can kind of be somewhat objective about, right?
Yeah.
But subjective stuff, like, it's just unbelievable how much time and how much money that can cost in the long
Yeah.
run.
So I would be more inclined as opposed to, we can put in neighborhood, I kind of said consider neighborhood characteristics, but I'd almost prefer to address the things which I think are somewhat addressed now in the DB process, which is privacy, overshadowing,
Yeah.
those kinds of characteristics, as opposed to, because I'm worried that if we start to go neighborhood by neighborhood and all that stuff, you're gonna get like, people in certain neighborhoods are gonna say, like, no, we don't want it, or whatever, and I don't know, it should just be more about the qualities, so it's like you're not overshadowing or overlooking your neighbors, it's about privacy, it's about those characteristics that then, and, because really, it's then up to staff to apply those, right?
Should also be as little as possible.
Yeah,
Just,
it shouldn't be overly
necessary, sufficient,
onerous.
but not beyond that.
So yeah, I'm a little hesitant, I don't know, do people feel strong? I'm a little hesitant to say it's a neighborhood-based thing, that it's more the characteristics of the individual property and how it interacts with its neighbors and issues of privacy and overlooking overshadowing. Is that, what do people think?
I'm okay with that.
Everybody feel strongly?
The only thing I worry about is if we're too loose, Daniel or whoever ends up being the planner
Yeah.
has to make a lot of subjective decisions and it becomes exhausting and you can end up under fire if you don't
Right.
have clear guidelines, that's all. It's a
Yeah.
balance between being
Yeah.
flexible and the staff person needing clear guidelines.
I mean, like, there is a design panel right for the code, but it really makes it complex. If if you want
Yeah.
to do a little
Yeah.
cottage somewhere.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
could
Okay.
I just confirm?
Yes.
Coming back then, so 5 we dealt with, we would be removing that. 6, were we removing that?
Which one's that? A safe use shall not exceed. Yes, we said that we will remove that size.
And we're removing 7 as well.
Remove.
So in looking at that, we basically have changed everything except one point.
I
So
don't,
more than.
out of my 7, that must have been 40, because the most is 50 anyway, so.
So Daniel, do you have a, what's your
I
instinct
think
saying?
my red flag would be removing the secondary suite size. Just because I think then you'd end up with, you know, like a 2,000-3,000 square foot houses that are attached. That's
So
the
maybe
secondary suite.
reconsider maximum size?
But, you know, because if it was like, if we said, well, it's 115 square meters to match detached, or if it's 120 or something, it's like, it's still,
Yeah, but
because I see the goal of being, okay, you can
Yeah.
do more, you can do a 3-bedroom suite as opposed to just a 1-bedroom suite. But if it's gone, then I feel like, okay, it's,
Yeah, but this is a big lot issue actually. I mean, I think Danielle is right,
Yeah.
because like, Bowen Island doesn't have a maximum house size. So for a big lot, you can build houses that are 15 or 20 or 30,000 square feet. 30,000 square feet, you know, you can put a pretty big suite in it, right?
So would you, so what do
Yeah.
we think, so maybe let's just ask, let's be specific. What do we think is the maximum reasonable size for a secondary suite, with the idea being it's affordable, it's diverse, it's aimed at lower and middle income? I actually think that the 115, the 1,200 square feet, that's a reasonable
Pretty good.
sized home
Yep.
for anybody.
No,
1,200 square feet?
yeah.
No, I
Yeah.
don't think so. I think it should be more like 1,800, maybe 2,400. Because if you go to these bigger lots, then
Yeah.
they have basically say, if there would be, if the zoning bylaw would give a maximum floor space ratio, right? That's a really big tool, because now you can have incentives, now you can give people incentives. right?
Yeah.
So there is a maximum house size built on, based on floor space, which most municipalities do. The problem with Bowen is there's only basically step backs and the site coverage and whatever, right?
Yep.
There is no
It's
floor space.
Height and site coverage usually.
But
Setbacks.
it's a huge tool for council to get everything done. So if
Yeah.
you say from, and then those percentages start to make sense. And say if you have a big lot and you can build a house that is, let's say, 6,000 square feet, right? And you can use that 6,000 square feet any way you want. Now you can put in a secondary suite that is 3,000 square feet, right? What's wrong with that? Instead of having one house that is 4,000 and 2,000 square feet, you split it in the middle. Now, then if you can have more than one suite, maybe there's a suite for 1,000 in it and a suite for 2,000 in it. But for a big family, and it's just market rent anyway, they may say that's ideal. So what I'm saying is you let the people sort out how they want to do it, but it has something to do with setting a maximum floor space ratio. And then if you say you want these secondary suites, then maybe you set your outright single family floor space lower, maybe 4,000 square feet, and you give them a 20 or 25% bonus if they put in a secondary suite.
So is
So,
that
so now the
something-
whole thing works.
I think it's an interesting opportunity that we have now, because we're looking at this and we're looking at a land
Mhm.
use bylaw, I
Yep.
think. Is
And
that,
we're looking at conservation development, which actually has some implications in terms of the configuration of the square footage throughout a large lot.
yeah,
Could I just check, what do you mean by conservation development?
It's something that the Advisory Planning Commission is taking a look at. And it means that if you've got a large piece of land, that you try to conserve as much of the
Ah.
land and concentrate the
Kind of a cluster,
residential.
right?
it's what we kind of call, what the OCP currently calls cluster development.
Sure.
Right?
Kind of.
I get it.
Yeah.
But, but there is a difference in that, what the heck was the difference again? There's a key difference that's not coming to mind right
Okay,
away.
but there is a difference. Okay.
Is there any thought on a house size limit on Bowen?
That's actually something I was wanting to add to the list of
Yeah.
recommendations for a report to council.
So,
I think one way or the other, we could say no limit, or we could say we probably should have a limit.
yeah.
I
And
think
just
there should
bring
be
it up.
a limit based, there should be an outright limit that is not one number. Because, or your floor space calculations work so well on these different lots, right? Because if you set a maximum for a 10-acre parcel, or for a 5, or for a 1-acre parcel, or for a smaller lot, that same maximum applies, and the rest is just floor space ratio, right? So at a certain point you reach the ceiling, right? So that may work, right? But then you have to set it very high, and the rest of it is already destructed. Okay, if you say your floor space ratio basically sets a maximum house size simply because you cannot have more floor space on a specific lot, right? And if that always works, then that maximum house size doesn't apply because you never reach that number anyway, right? Now you go to lots that are so big that the percentage results in homes that are just huge, right? Then you can say, well, like I think the district of North Vancouver says 4,000 square feet is 4,300 or so, whatever they have, is the limit. No house can be bigger. But that really, what you're saying, that really for the larger lots, right? Because the small lots can never get up to the number anyway if you have a floor space regulation.
I don't think we have a single floor space. I think it would have to be by zone. So like if we consider, let's say we look at two things. One's a 10-acre lot somewhere, and one's a quarter-acre lot in one of our sort of more dense neighborhoods, right? They have to be treated differently. But I think one of the questions which Daniel said, and you've just sort of answered as to what North Van or West Van does, do we in principle think there should be a maximum house size? And I think Richmond actually controversial, like it was a big deal. They recently put something in because of the ALR lands and farming. And
but it's something like 10,000 square feet.
So do we want to recommend a maximum house size period and as a guideline? And then next question is about FSR in different zones, but do we think that that's a reasonable thing to say?
Well, the FSR actually does that. So if you have an FSR, the moment you put an FSR in place, and you say on a 10-acre lot, the FSR is very small, so when you calculate it out, you get a number. On 10 acres, maybe you get, if you calculate it out, maybe the number is 6,000.
So what do we think that is? Like what? But that's what I'm asking.
It's the same thing.
What's the maximum house size that we think is reasonable? Or do we want to be that specific? Is it 4,300 square feet? Is it 6,000? Is it 10,000? Is it, or do we not go to there?
Could I just ask, what's the purpose of putting a limit to square footage?
I think what we're getting at is, if we say that there is some sort of limit, and then we want to incentivize people to build suites, or make them suite ready, or build detached secondary suites to improve diverse housing options, you say, okay, for example, you own a 10-acre lot, you are allowed to build 4,000 square feet, period, if you want to build a house. If you make it suite ready, you can build 5,000 square feet. If you make it build a detached secondary suite, you can build 6,000 square feet. So those are the ways that you can incentivize people to do it.
So what I'm saying is, you don't really have to, the moment you have floor space ratio, right, you don't really need to have one maximum house size for the whole island. Because the floor space itself, if I have a lot of, I'll just give you an example. Let's say I have a lot of 10,000 square feet. And if I have a floor space ratio of 10%, I can be there to build 1,000 square feet, right? So the lot size with the FSR restricts me in what I can build. I don't need a maximum house size. Most of those people are going to work to the maximum of the floor space that they're allowed. But the floor space that they're allowed, the maximum, is what the community wants, because it's in the zoning bylaw, which it isn't now, right? So then if you go to a really 10-acre lot, then you can say, okay, 10 acres is, what is it, 40,000 times 10 is 400,000 square feet. Let's say if I give you 1% FSR, you can only build 4,000 square feet. So I'm saying is that the moment the floor space ratio is tailored to the different zones and lot sizes, that is kind of done, right? The nice thing of setting that limit a touch lower and making sure that people like to get more square footage if they do certain things, and all these objectives that you have there, people are going to look at them seriously. They're going to build these rented suites and all that.
Okay. That's, you're basically saying what Rob just said.
Well, it's the same. I'm saying so from the, if we say what's the, what I don't like about is saying one big number for a maximum house size, is that it's too simplified. It only applies to the really big lot, right? And what I also find is that you can see it very clearly in Vancouver that people actually buy lots. They buy, if you buy a 33-foot lot, right? And you want 3 bedrooms upstairs. A lot of families want that. You want 2 kids together, right? Now, if you have a 33-foot lot, it's tight. So then you buy a 42-foot lot, which costs them whatever, a few $100,000 more, right? So there's a direct relationship between what you can do with the lot and the size of the lot, right? So but at a certain point, as these lots get bigger, that gets lost,
Yes.
right? So by putting an FSR on it, called maximum house size, that is calculated based on the size of the lot, right? And then you incentivize what you want people to do.
So what I'm getting at though, Frits, is can we give, or do we want to give, I would like to, a guideline to staff and council as to what we feel an appropriate, the outcome of those FSR regulations. What are we talking about? Are we talking
Well-
4,000 square feet maximum? Are we
No.
talking a 10,000 square foot maximum?
You know, what I don't like about it, I find it so arbitrary. And I'll give you an example. Like, always makes me think about this. In the past, people, Canadians and people in Europe took care of their parents, right? Now we have all these social systems and we do that less. We have a lot of clients that are, for instance, Chinese, or they are from the Iranians, or they come from the East Indians. And what I actually like about them, they actually take care of their families. They love their families.
Yeah, yeah,
They may
multi-generational
hate them
living
at
is
times
very
too,
common.
but you know, they have a huge social, and they will purposely buy a larger lot because they can put a bigger house on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then somebody says you built a monster home, well, but it has a huge social function. But then you may say, okay, these things are getting too big. Well, fair enough, right? But is it just because I don't need a big house, or it doesn't fit Bowen? So I'm saying is that if people specifically buy a larger lot because they need it for their family, right? Are they then? I'm saying you have to be careful with those restrictions.
Yeah, but you're saying you're in favor of FSR. What, as a guideline, do you think, because we have to put a number to it. I'm not saying that it should be a maximum per square footage, but let's take a 10-acre lot. What should be the FSR on a 10-acre lot?
Yeah, so, okay, so for example, I'll give Vancouver as an example because they have all these numbers. The outright FSR on a lot in Vancouver, a single family lot, is typically 0.6. That means that if you have a 10,000 square feet lot, you can build 6,000 square feet. If you have a 1,000 square foot lot, which doesn't exist, you can build 600 square feet, right? 0.6, 60% of the lot. Then, if it's conditional and you do certain things, you can have 0.7. Then, if you put in whatever, if the house is a passive home, you can have 0.75. You know what I mean? So what I'm saying is, it's completely built into there. They use zoning as a tool.
Yeah, and I agree, and that's what we're
Density is a
recommending.
tool,
That's what
right?
we're recommending. But what are the, to give, or maybe we don't. Daniel, like, do you want us to give
Well,
you
you
some sort of guideline, or are you okay
You
to
can
work with
calculate
that?
back, right? You can calculate back.
Kate's Hill is 0.3.
0.3, they have a number.
Yeah.
Friends. I mean, in essence, like, you know, we don't have FSR, but we do have a maximum floor area in a sense that we allow a maximum lot coverage and maximum height, right?
I
So
know,
to a
but
certain
Yeah.
it can
extent,
get ridiculous.
But with those diagrams on a 10-acre lot, it's...
on a 10-acre lot, no, but on a, like, you know, in like Snug Point or
Yeah.
Bay, people are at their maximum.
Yeah, but so if you take that calculation, right, you know what FSR is. What is that FSR? If you calculate that.
I don't know actually.
Okay, also we have to watch with FSR a little bit, is that most bylaws have exemptions from FSR.
Right, okay.
So then if you talk about maximum house size, what does that really mean? I'll give you another example. In West Vancouver, the floor space ratio is typically 0.35. However, they exclude basements if they are enough into the ground.
Right.
The effective FSR is 0.5. We've done a house in West Vancouver with an FSR that is higher than 0.7. And I thought I should not tell council because they all get fired.
Okay, I want to move along from this discussion, so I think I'm going to make some notes, yeah? Final thoughts?
I welcome Frits and a measuring by FSR.
Yeah.
Well, the issue that's probably in the back of my head is the 12,000 square foot or 16,000 square foot home built on a 10-acre lot that's used as a holiday home, is visited 3 times a year, and yet that same 10-acre lot can't be divided into 16 1,000 square foot homes for people who are actually going to be the community of Bowen Island. That's what I want to address there.
Exactly.
Yeah, how do we, because that's a big one.
So it's in essence, like the FSR we allow on most
I'm
of our
not
bonus
sure if you
scales,
can-
we allow a bonus plus.
If you can then change that
Yeah,
with
yeah,
rules.
but you can,
I think you can only change
you
it
want to
with
use it as
culture.
a tool, right? So you have to kind of calculate.
Well, more like,
calculate back
the
how
tools that we're
you
talking about for that are more like
to-
cluster, sorry,
Yeah.
I've got two different
Should
conversations
I have
going
an
here.
example?
One
for that?
conversation.
Yes. That's
Sorry,
okay.
no, it just,
That's
like,
okay.
it was just like, it was the same thing about how do you do it with the FSR, and then I said to Danielle, you can probably count back, calculate back, you know, what FSR actually is.
Right, how
But
it's.
then, and then, so if council wants to have an example, then if you take a lot, a rather typical lot in the bay, and you say with the current restrictions on site coverage and setbacks and height,
Yeah,
you can get this in.
right,
But you know, that's just really a primitive way of doing it, because the more the house is a box, right, you almost put it, you set an envelope and a box, and you pump more stuff in it. So it's actually not the nicest way to control square footage, because in the end, if somebody wants the maximum, they end up with a very primitive shape. But maybe if the steppings for height like this, if there's an incentive, it's basically a box.
yeah. Okay, let's table the FSR, and if we want to, we could meet or have an email discussion about it.
Danielle has to start.
Yeah.
Seriously.
But I think, and Daniel, to your question about, you know, somebody can have a 10-acre lot, a 16,000 square foot house, but we can't take that same lot and divide it up into 16 1,000 square foot homes. I feel like that's a recommendation that we're making to look at cluster development. That's one way to address that. I know it's not exactly what you're saying, because I feel like that question is maybe more of a, like an OCD, like an official community plan revision. Am I right? Like that's a bigger holistic discussion about, we have these 10-acre lots, or, yeah, it's,
Bowen's wonderful, that seems my description words for Bowen now, but we chose what we've got at Cape Roger Curtis, and we're not willing to be, to fess up that that was our choice that's
Yes.
created it.
oh, well.
And
you
I
are.
welcome any move to use the land more effectively.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Just
Maureen?
a warning. Our objective with this, I think, was to get some recommendations back to council fairly quickly,
Yeah.
related specifically to the secondary suites bylaw. And I think that there are lots of things we could address on housing. But if we want to make some progress, and
Keep it
if we want
simple, yeah.
if we want to get on the council's radar,
Yeah.
we can't hammer them with tons of stuff at
Yeah.
once. If we give them something that they're familiar with and where they're expecting an update on how's this work, you know, because we've had it now for a couple of years, I think we would have
Yeah.
better outcome
Yeah.
and more receptivity from council.
You know, I think you're absolutely right. The reason why this maximum house size actually came up, to take a step back, is that if we allow unlimited size secondary suites, and then if you can build a 10,000 square feet home, and you divide it in a number of large homes in a way, right?
Okay, so I think I've got, and I've numbered them now to match this, so that'll be easier for everybody to, so I've numbered those. From our discussion, our meeting that we had a couple of weeks ago, we also had what's section 2 in our, and maybe we've actually talked about this already, so section 2 we said, and this was more about zoning as opposed to specifically the bylaw, it was consider relaxing the limit of one accessory use on the site. So maybe that was one, needs updating, specific water. Okay, so this was sort of tied in with that, allowing multiple, our sort of number 1, consider allowing both or 2 smaller suites within property. So I don't know that there's anything else we need to say on there. And then number 2, allow cluster zoning. So I think we'll put that into that list of, like, we'll make that secondary. So we'll have the specific list that addresses this bylaw, and here's what we think should actually change about that. And then we'll have this secondary list of other recommendations. And I think we put this number 2, creating cluster zoning.
So, well, I still think you should go back a little bit, because
Yeah.
when we said we removed a lot of restrictions in the size of these secondary suites, that actually does bring up the discussion about maximum home size. And I think we can say there should be a maximum house size in each zone, and it's based on floor space. That's all you need to say, because that answers the question.
Okay, so, yeah, so other considerations, consider FSR in all zones and have incentive bonus for suites. So,
No, you have to put in the linkage that there's a maximum house size on each lot, which is calculated by its maximum floor space ratio. On a neighborhood basis, right? Because what will come up is that if these houses become huge and the suites are unlimited, then it's not going to work, right?
They're not going to be affordable.
Well, yeah, it is going to be.
and I think the idea behind, and just so I'm clear and it's clear what I've written, the idea behind putting an FSR is so that FSR in all the zones is that you do create a maximum house size, and then you can incentivize your bonus square footage to
Absolutely.
get the things that we're after, right? To get the secondary suites, to do be rental ready, to do an detached one. Like that's the whole point of
Yep.
putting that in, right? Just so we're all on the same page, yeah. So consider, I know it's not up there, so consider FSR in all zones, and I have colon, sub-point, creates a maximum house size and to be considered on a neighborhood basis. B, have incentive bonus for suites, and I'm gonna put / suite ready.
Rental ready, right?
Rental ready, sure, whatever term you want to
Yeah.
use. Rental ready,
Suite ready.
and then C, each zone to be considered differently. So yeah, I kind of have that consider on a neighborhood basis.
With B,
Yep,
could you add, explain what incentive is, just in parentheses or something about?
okay, yeah, so,
Additional permitted floor space.
No, that's the easiest way to do it. Floor
Yeah.
space.
Because otherwise, when people hear incentive, sometimes they.
yeah, it might be money. Yeah, fair enough, yeah. So, so have incentive bonus in the brackets, additional permitted floor space for suites or rental ready.
I think for now, just use floor space. There are other incentives. Like some incentives, I give you an example. City of Vancouver allows some more height in certain locations, which they like because it pulls basements more over the ground, right? You get better livable suites because they have exempt floor space.
So why don't I add that an additional permitted floor space, height, etc. So it leaves it a little bit open for planning staff, that the idea is there's a bonus, right? There's some kind of incentive for you to build a suite or something, because you'll get to build more square feet, more height, whatever that might be.
Is that the place to include relaxed parking for the secondary suite?
We've got that in the,
Okay.
is that? Yeah, parking, it's addressed directly in the parking, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, FSR I don't think would, yeah.
50% small stalls. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then I have D, that the goal being to incentivize diverse housing, so sorry, I'm repeating myself here. And then I have E, give exemptions for certain items, like question mark, maybe consider exemptions for certain, and that's just gonna be just to work out the details, garages, storage, like, yeah, just consider that. And then, again, do we come back to, do we wanna make any kind of recommendation? I know Frits, you said no basically, but do we wanna give a guideline as to what we think an appropriate maximum house size is for?
No, you can
Larger
have, I
lots.
think you can, no, I think what we agreed, you have the number, it is just set by the maximum.
Yeah, but what is that
FSR.
number? That's what
Well,
I'm getting
I
at,
think
like I
that
get it's through
the
FSR and
now
I
has
get
to
all that
be
stuff, but
so-
you can craft the FSR
Yeah.
to give you a 10,000 square foot house, or you can craft the FSR to give you a 4,000 square foot house. Which one are we aiming for, or do we wanna be that specific?
It's hard to be specific because that number is different in each neighborhood for each. It works out different for each lot size, right? Because you calculate based on the lot size.
Right.
So it's a percentage of the lot
But
size.
I would
Yeah.
say for the smaller lots, we're less concerned, because I think that can be, done
Yeah, so
differently. We're
so
thinking more overall.
each zone
It's a-
can have a different maximum FSR in it.
Okay,
It's not 0.6 blanket over.
No,
all.
no,
No,
that
it
doesn't
can have
make sense.
0.6, 0.3,
so
0.2.
does anybody else feel like, is there an ultimate maximum size? So let's say, because basically 10 acres is, I mean, I know there's some larger lots, but 10 acres is kind
So
of.
do we
a
say
sweet spot.
something's just obnoxiously big for Bowen Island? That's what you're really saying?
Well, or do we not want to address it at all? Again, I'm just looking to, you said, is it West Van said 4,300 square feet? Richmond has said, I think, 10,000 square feet.
But
Do
in a
we
way,
go there or not?
in a way, it's not different for any other lot. For each lot, the FSR will calculate a maximum house
I
size.
guess
Yes.
that's what Robin's asking, so on a 10-acre lot,
Yeah,
Of the,
how much square area should a 10-acre lot have?
Yeah,
So, like, do you know exactly the difference in program between a 4, 5, 6, or 7,000 square feet home, and who lives in it? So I would say, and the impact on neighbors. I think that to set a number is so arbitrary. But if you look at some of the houses,
Yeah, but that's what we're gonna do,
but
we're
yes,
setting
that's-
FSR,
That's an
that's what we're
arbitrary
doing.
number.
So what's that
I
number?
can say on a 10-acre lot, the
But
house size should be 5,000
No.
square feet. Okay, what's the FSR? That
okay,
gives me
well,
5,000
that's
square
fine.
feet.
you, you,
Yeah,
you,
we
you
can
can
work
pick. Okay, well, take a number.
So, I mean, I think it should be, so, again, we're the housing
Take
committee
a
and our.
number. The very
I will.
biggest house.
Let me
okay.
do one sentence of preamble. We are the housing committee, we're trying to incentivize them to build other things. I would say we wanna set it on the lower side, for example, 3,600 square feet. Just throwing it out there. So then you have an incentive of, say, a bonus 1,000 square feet or 1,200 square feet if you build your detached thing. Or you have a bonus of
Yeah.
whatever, or maybe you have a bonus 1,500 if you build a detached, so you actually get a little bit more in the house if you build a detached. Like, that's what we're trying
But
to
you
drive,
have the
right?
same discussion for every lot, is what I'm saying. You have the same discussion in DP, you have the same in North Landing, you have the same in half-acre lots. For all these lots, you go through exactly the discussion that you're saying.
Right,
But if it somehow gives peace to everybody that there's an absolute maximum,
yeah.
then just pick a number, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and so I think that's what I'm getting at, is let's say, why don't we pick two? One is a 10-acre lot, one is a 1/4 acre lot, as a guideline to say to staff, this is what we think is an appropriate number from your housing committee's point of view. Maureen?
The conservation development point, I remember what the major
Great.
distinction is. And it's that with, for example, the strata that was mentioned earlier, where there are private homes and a large common
Yeah.
area that is owned by the strata. So that could be called cluster housing. With conservation development, the intent would be to cluster the homes, but the remaining land, a significant portion of that would be given over to the municipality and become public land. And the intent would be to increase the proportion of public land versus private land on the island. So there's a
That makes
very
a lot of sense.
significant
Yeah.
difference in the outcome when you're looking at one or the other. And how it might relate to house size is that conservation development could be, I think, a tool that's used in discussion of house size. So if for the 10-acre lots there was a restriction, I won't say what size, but if it was a certain amount, if the landowner were prepared under a conservation development policy to hand over a chunk of land which they may not be using. I mean, if you look at some of the 10-acre lots, they've used the part of the land they want to use. It's the waterfront, and there's lots of land remaining that's not being utilized, but a piece of that land connected with another piece of land that was became public land through conservation development would be an asset to the municipality, and they could potentially be incentivized by additional floor space.
I've got the principle of that, but I prefer the housing committee to use that style of principle to have the owner can build a slightly larger house or incentivized house with a pocket of land is then given out to Birch to be used to create housing for working people on the island in the future.
Yeah.
And so that's of a greater utility than having
Yeah.
natural land, more beauty on the island. I mean, it comes back to me, a Bowen issue is we want to protect the beauty of the island and we don't care whether there's people on it or not. And when you choose that style of lifestyle, only the wealthy ultimately can afford to be here.
I love that, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's great. So one of the incentives for having a bit larger spot is that extra money will go for cluster housing.
Well, no, but to a portion, from a 10-acre lot, a 1/4 acre out of there, or half acre goes to Birch for them to develop, but it's got to be in a place where it's on
Or let's say for a non-profit to do
a
it. We don't have to
non-profit,
be
yeah,
specific.
and not
It's-
so,
it's-
but
no,
it's
no,
a
it's-
non-profit system to encourage.
What you're saying is actually, it is commonly used.
Yes.
Again, Bowen doesn't use it enough. It's basically 2-tier or multi-tier zoning. You have an outright use, you can put a house on it, it meets the zoning bylaw, it's just maybe a small house, maybe it's 2,600 square feet. In the other tier, it says, it's called, normally referred to as amenity zoning, and you don't have to be super specific what that amenity is, because it can change over years. Maybe it's housing for birds, maybe it's sports fields, maybe it can be
Or
everything.
maybe it's just left.
You know, and yes, Cape Portugal, this is an excellent example, you know, and I can actually forward you an example for Cape Portugal Curtis, because I do a little sketch for it.
No, I saw it was circulated by Robin to us.
Well, yeah,
but
it's
not
more,
sketch.
what I'm saying is that the amenity zoning came up already 20 years ago, and then it just gets stuck somewhere and people forget about it. The idea is, it's called two-tier zoning. You have your outright use, what you can do, you can put your little house on your lot, right, maybe restricted by a maximum, right, maybe with FSR. Then there's a second level called again incentives, right, they're not directly in the zoning, but it's a second zoning. Now you go from outright zoning to conditional zoning, you know. If you go in the city of Vancouver, the whole downtown is basically conditional zoning.
So I think I'm going to cut us off there, because I realize we're quite over time on this item. So what I will do, I'm gonna clean this up, and I will send it around to everybody for comment, and then if we do feel like we need another meeting in the month to hash out a few more details, I personally think it would be useful for us to put like what we consider to be as a guideline, if they decide to create FSRs, here's our suggestion as to what a maximum house size would be on a 10 acre, on a quarter acre. So I think I'm gonna throw some numbers at it, so please respond.
Yeah.
And then we can, make those. So yeah, let's move on from this one. I think that, but thank you. That was, I think, really worthwhile discussion, and I hope we all feel a little clearer on what we're doing, but I think we've specifically addressed this is what we want, and then we have a whole bunch of other ideas, so we'll have to figure out how to craft those, but I do want to make sure we get this dealt with very clearly, specifically, and we get that in time to there, and then hopefully we can have our other recommendations ready, but if not, I'd rather us take a bit more time, and we give those to council later, but I want to make sure this gets addressed in a timely fashion. Good, okay, so that's 5.2 done. 5.3, we've got that. So now I just want to check in, because we were supposed to, I didn't realize this time, I kind of assumed 11:30 we were kind of done, but it says 11:10. Is everybody okay to stay until 11:30? Yeah, okay, so we'll try to move quickly through these. We've got the maps that Daniel did, and then we do have a land use bylaw, so we might have to skip that land use bylaw review in the, I feel like we did kind of actually address a lot of that in our just discussion now, so let's go through these maps first and see where we're up to. So Daniel, you're up.
Okay, so these are planning technician Tess Taylor and myself put together. So the first one, that's sort of the off-gray colors, is just trying to show where is building taking place since 2015 is how far that test went. So
And up till now, so like up till mid-2019?
yeah, up till probably August,
Okay.
maybe July. And so this was net, so she made sure to take out, I think, demolitions. So it's like if somebody took down a house and built a house.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
net is not included in there. So some places have just seen renewal, essentially, of housing stock, and that's not captured here.
How is a dwelling defined? Is that a single
Yeah.
family house?
I asked for that as well. If you
Yeah.
could also find out how many of these are like 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, it would be very helpful information.
I think it's safe to say the vast majority are single-family
Yeah.
homes, right? And then, but it's not, what's not clear is do they have secondary suites?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
A detached secondary suite would be a separate, because it's a separate building,
It
has a
would
separate building
definitely be a
permit?
separate dwelling.
Yeah, so that's captured,
And you're right, I'm just trying to find her notes.
yeah, let's say, yeah, so let's make it up, so like
I don't
secondary
remember
suites
offhand that.
isn't captured. But I mean, I think, I wonder if it's possible or useful. So I mean, I think it's safe to say none of these are attached, but no, because the Sunco House development, Village
Yeah.
or whatever, there's at least 2 duplexes that are under construction right
Yeah.
now, so that's 2 duplexes.
So those are definitely both dwellings
So that's 2 dwellings.
each, like
Right.
a duplex would be 2 dwellings
Yeah.
definitely. And then I can't remember offhand if we included, if a house with a secondary suite, I feel like we would have included that as 2 dwellings as well, but that's the one I don't remember offhand.
Okay, so maybe that's just
Yeah.
one clarifying
Yeah.
point.
So
Okay.
in 4 years, we've built 60 units, completed 60, and then in 1 year, we've got 56 under construction.
Yeah. So
Wow.
like basically 20, like if you look at our applications, I think 2017, we had, you know, significantly more, like when we looked at our building permit revenue from 2017, it was like double the previous years. And like I know when I was doing we did a grant application for rebates for building permit applications, and it was like we averaged 24, I think, a year, new building permits, but it's been slanted hugely, like 2018 not as much as 2017, but 2017 was like the high point we had for building permit applications.
So what were the totals again?
60 have been built, and 56 are under construction this year.
Yeah, and so most of like under construction are those 2017 permits.
So that's
Are they
adding
new-
10% to the building stock in 4 years, is that right?
Yeah, we're at 1900.
So these are just new
5%.
buildings?
Yeah.
How much
They're
percent?
not additions or anything like that?
No, so new buildings and so net, and so Tess and Barry went through and removed of demolitions.
And
How many-
additions, anything?
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
it's 1900.
How many of the building permits of still to be built material is rental units?
I don't know, it would just be the secondary suites and the detached secondary suites.
Of which we can't know, so how much, is there stuff in the
We can
works
know.
that
Yeah, we
have-
can
Yeah, we
know.
can find out.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it'd be helpful to get that.
Yeah.
Stuff that's in the work, sorry.
Helpful to get what?
The number of secondary suites that
Yeah,
are included
As a
in
rental
that.
unit. What's been built that would be considered secure rental housing? So, for example, with secondary suites, it's not secure.
I would say the answer is no.
Yeah.
I think,
that's
but in the pipeline, which I don't know if that's addressed on the next one, in the pipeline, for example, on the Birch project is a dedicated
And
rental.
Birch is roughly how many? I should know this, I know.
No, it's varied, we just sort of, it's roughly 25 to 27 units at the moment, we're aiming for.
27,
And then,
28 rental.
it's public record, the lot on the corner that has an offer in on it, that's to be purpose-built rentals.
What do you mean the lot on the corner?
The area 1 of lot
Oh, I
2.
see,
For
okay.
sale signs.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's,
That is proposed at the moment to be dedicated rental.
yeah, do you know how many units?
No, I would guess somewhere in the ballpark of 20-ish, but that's a very rough ballpark. It's to be designed,
Who's developing
but just
that?
basically on the
Allison, can
FSR.
we finish going through just this one, but
Yeah,
any other
yeah.
points on this one?
Sorry,
And then
okay.
that's more what the next one just kind of captures.
Okay. So yeah, so
Just
this,
on
I think
that,
this is
anyone
really interesting and useful, what's been built in the last 4 years. And I think that was a good point, like that it's a 5% increase, so that could kind of be helpful. Okay, anything else on the building permit one? No, so let's go on to the next one, and yeah, maybe I'll.
So that's, and then just sort of clarification on this one, so what this was looking at specifically was like, where is there, permitted
Mm.
additional lots that aren't created yet? So like in Scarborough to Hood Point and the Mount Gardner, both say 0. Now, there's vacant lots in both of those areas that are sort of long-standing vacant lots, right? They've been subdivided in the 1920s or the 60s or something, and somebody's holding on, so that's not captured in there.
Okay,
But what it's trying to capture is like, in the rezonings, in the CD zones, how many lots are outstanding in those, like in the zoning, that somebody could come along and subdivide and create more lots. And then of those, how many have been created? So we struggled with this one hugely, and trying to say, okay, what's a useful information of what we're actually trying to
Yeah.
say, and what, so part of them bringing it back to say, well, what are you looking for, or what would be most
Yeah.
helpful?
so I'm thinking, Allison, what I'm hearing from you is 1 would be a measure of dedicated rentals.
Yep.
Like that would be of interest to this
And
committee probably.
below, what's it called, below market purchase housing?
So maybe could we phrase that as dedicated affordable housing
That's it.
as a measure?
Mm-hmm,
Asking about where that's represented here?
yes.
And I
that's
mean,
probably,
what-
reality is probably we just do that as a separate map, there's not very many. We
Okay.
can just say,
Yeah, 'cause-
these are rezonings that have housing agreements already in place,
Yeah.
and these are ones where, like, rezonings have been permitted as part of a,
Be very
like, a
helpful.
requirement, so that would be, we just make a third map, I think would be the cleanest.
Great.
Okay, and I'm thinking also to, like, it's useful for this now, But I'm hopeful, and again,
Yeah.
not wanting too much work on the planning department, that this is something that can be updated on a regular basis. I don't know what interval, but at some sort of regular basis, so that as time goes on, you can look at it as a record, or it's an app, like it's just a reference point for people. So yeah, what would be useful? So yeah, dedicated rentals, dedicated affordable housing. Perhaps that's a separate map. I know that my overall goal in asking for this was so that we could see what's coming.
Yes.
Like what's already been approved. So for example, the valley, which I think includes, or maybe not, maybe the Cove area includes Grafton Lakes, right?
Yeah, that's the valley.
The valley,
That's
okay, so
basically that
that's where
166.
primary dwellings
Yeah.
permitted 166 and lots created to date. So I guess, I'm wondering maybe if this language needs to
Yeah.
change, because it's not totally clear.
Yeah.
So, like, what I would like to see out of this is what's been approved but not yet built. That's, I think, what I'm getting at. So we know Grafton Lakes, I can't remember what the numbers are, it's like 120 or 130 or something like that. I don't think any of them have been built yet. So it's sort of like seeing if it can be like, okay, what's already approved, what's been rezoned and is approved, and then what's actually out of that been, well, I'm just trying to think, that's not built. I think that's the key thing that we want to see. Yeah, does that make sense? Because I know, I'm just trying to think it through in my head, because if we said, oh, well, out of that, how many are built and stuff, once it's built, it's there, we can kind of count it. It's more, we're thinking about what's the invisible housing that's already coming up, that's already been approved, that you can't look around and see, but
It's in the pipeline.
but it's in the pipeline. Thank you, that's a really good term for
I
it.
would also love to know of those, how many of those are one bedroom, how many of those are bachelor suites, how many of those are
So
two bedroom?
very rarely do we have, some of our zones have like a maximum size that we talked about.
Yeah.
But even then, we wouldn't know that.
Okay.
So even like area 1, we allow a certain amount of floor area for residential use and there's not units, or when we allow units. Even I'm thinking like, so almost most like prescriptive we have is the one that's area 2 of lot 1 allows 20 units and it has a maximum size and it has a maximum average height. Even then, I couldn't tell you they're gonna be 1 bedroom or 2
Yeah,
bedroom.
and I think actually, Allison, what you're wondering about, which is very valid, I think will actually be addressed in the housing needs assessment, not in these maps.
Yeah.
So I think this map, what I was hoping to get out of it, and I think the permits is really interesting and I think a good metric, but what I'd like to really see, and I like that term, which is really clear, what's in the pipeline? What's coming up, it's already been approved, but it's not yet built out. And so then we know, like, looking at this, if these are what these numbers represent, in the Cove area, there's 213 approved dwelling units that haven't been built yet. There's 166 in the valley that are approved that haven't been built yet. Out in Seymour Bay, 160, like, it's, it means like there's a lot on the books. Whether those are actually gonna get built out anytime soon, are they, vacant land or whatever, but it's sort of, yeah, I don't know, is this useful? Like, what do people think?
Oh, I
Or
think
how would it be,
it's
how would it be more useful?
How could it be
Because
more
We're happy
useful?
to tinker.
Yeah, like you can
right?
take whatever info
Yeah.
and stats and
Yeah.
data and put it in a map, but what info do we wanna get out of it?
I don't know if this is at all possible, Daniel, but if there are any timelines associated with the primary dwellings permitted. So for example, when Birch comes into the picture, you do have an expectation of a rough timeline.
Yeah.
With the area, there's an expectation of a
Yeah.
rough timeline. I don't know how you map it,
Yeah.
but that would be good in terms of sort of the influx
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
the
I agree.
So I think
So
to
far
some
in
extent, I
this
think that's
was-
what we try to do with the lots created, to say, okay, there's like the valley, which is basically Grafton, there's 166.
Yeah.
Lots created means, I think, under PLR, there's 25.
Okay, so the
So
lots
that's maybe that's like
created
the first
gives you-
phase, yeah.
the
So like the
lots-
lots created is a subset of the, or Seymour Bay, right, they're allowed 161. They actually have 88 that are under PLR or like recently created, so they've
Okay.
basically done half of them have been.
Okay,
Like
so
our
that
public-
does give you a
Oh,
heads
okay,
up
so
on
that
how
gives
things are
you-
moving.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay, Okay. So yeah, I wonder if there's just maybe a
Yeah,
different way to phrase it.
Yeah,
Or a little explanatory note
yeah.
that could say something like, these are ones that are, actively in development, or maybe that's too specific, but have been subdivided and we anticipate being developed.
yeah.
Yeah.
Something
Yeah,
along
I
those
mean, when you
lines.
said PLR, because I know the jargon now,
Yeah.
it changed how I understood that. So
Yeah.
if there's like another way of signaling that to
Yeah.
Sure.
to
So
people.
a note. these have been subdivided. Yeah, because it's the whole subdivision, like really you don't subdivide until you're ready to sell it and build it, right?
Yeah.
Generally.
Well, some of the ones in Norway have been PLR for like 10 years, so.
Right, okay.
Well,
Yeah. But, yeah, okay.
the other thing I thought is that this would be useful to share with Glenn in
Mhm.
thinking about water.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, excellent, and that was another, well, do we want to quickly go
Yeah,
on?
could you-
And I
could you
just want to be
embellish
really
that
quick, because we've only
in
got a
2
few
minutes?
minutes. But yeah, let's be really
Can
quick.
we talk about water, because I had a conversation with Stephen, who works for.
I can speak to it.
Okay, thank you.
All of the local area committees, the water committees, are going to be meeting over the next 2 weeks or so. Is
Yes.
that correct? And I wonder, could you pick up the Tunstall agenda just so you can see what's going on?
Agenda?
Whoa, big.
That's for the information, it's all going to be, yeah, it's all going to be structured. Advisory committee meetings are open anyways, but this is a sort of a legally required information meeting for the community. We expect them to be quite crowded this year. So this is the information package that we provide every year. It's financial information, Vancouver Coastal Health, reports about water quality operations. And then each district is gonna have their own little thing that they want to talk about. King Edward Bay and Blue Water, I've put in a list of questions they want answered. So that's supposed to be about an hour for that. It'll be followed by a local advisory committee meeting where they can make recommendations if they want to. Recommendations can happen there.
So at the moment, we have someone who is acting as the head of public works. He's an engineer and hydrologist. He was brought in to address the immediate issue in Blue Water and King Edward Bay. He was part of the resolution of dealing with a very large leak and helping to get the reservoirs stable there. There's an issue at the moment in Eagle Cliff where they're currently on stage 4 water restrictions, and the reason for the water shortage there is somewhat less clear. So water is a live issue and being looked at by a professional who will be coming back after having gone through all the committee meetings. We'll be coming back with some recommendations around how to handle the water resource as a whole on the island. And there are some recommendations that came out of that are in development still in the Environment and Climate Action Committee. There have been points raised by various members of the community around the impact of new development on the existing water systems. Glenn has said very clearly at this point he is not seeing that wells being dug in the approved developments in King Edward Bay adjacent to Blue Water are having impacts on that water supply. But it's a continuing discussion, and it's being addressed really actively at the moment.
So should we maybe could we make a note for next month's agenda to just add because I think it is an important thing for us to look at, and maybe after these water meetings, there might be more information, and so I just don't want to lose it, but we're just completely out of time today.
I think
So-
yeah, it's so important that we not silo ourselves and say our issue
Yeah.
is important at
Yeah.
the cost of who knows what else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one other thing I would love to bring onto the next one,
Yep.
which is winter is approaching. We have a few people on the island who are essentially homeless. Not a lot, but I'd love to discuss what can we put in place for that population.
So maybe we could probably ask maybe Jen McGowan to give us an update on emergency cold weather shelter or something like that. Is that?
I'm thinking more than emergency.
Oh, okay.
Like
So
small, tiny home, trailer, a place where we could have 5 to 10 people can be housed with some sort of care.
So let's add that as an agenda item, I'm not sure that, okay, yeah, I have no idea how we could do that, but let's add it as something to
Yeah.
talk about.
What was the first one before
The
that?
first one was just water supply and
Water
and future housing, so, and it would just be an item. Okay, thank you so much for these maps. Is that enough feedback for you, Daniel, to
Yep.
kind of update them? And thank you so much. I'm sure it was a fair bit of work, and I think it's a really useful tool.
Thank you. Is this from you?
So 6.1, the land use review, I think we discussed a lot of the items in our other chat, but if, Frits, can you let us know if you want in the next agenda, we don't have time today, but do you want to include that in the next agenda
Well,
to
I think
discuss?
it should be, but maybe if you look at those information items, but maybe Danielle could explain clearer in the next meeting is the relationship between the 2019 island plan, the 2010 and the 2010 official community plan, and maybe also the Snug Cove master plan, because I find that I cannot.
No.
Just do that kind of.
No, I gotta say no.
Well, no, because there's a legal I'm totally puzzled, to be honest, how different plans can totally ignore the official community plan. I mean, if somebody stands up in a meeting and says, well, council cannot do this because it's not in the OCP. It says in the OCP that council doesn't have to implement the OCP, but it cannot do anything that contravenes the OCP. So the OCP for every municipality is the guiding document.
So
It's
can
not-
we,
Yeah, but I'm saying that's
Yeah.
a big deal because like it has a lot to do with what happens in Snug Cove, what happens with.
yeah, can we
Yeah,
discuss
but
this
it's a
next
big
week,
one.
because I
So
think
say
it's a
that
bigger
if-
thing.
if-
So let's just bump this land use bylaw review, and then, I don't think, Daniel, let's not prepare anything just yet, and let's discuss
Well, you can think
at the
about it,
next
he
meeting
knows what the big
what you're
question
getting
is.
I don't wanna give
It is
them
a
some
good
sort of
issue,
huge
it's really
assignment.
important.
So let's talk about it next meeting. And the housing needs assessment, did you wanna say anything on it, just that it's out there?
It's out, it closes September 20th. I think I've had 4 firms contact me for information,
Okay,
so
great.
there's some contact.
Okay.
If you know anyone who wants to do a housing needs assessment, point
Yeah.
them, it's on our website.
I have no
Fritz
idea.
does not want to, but
Yeah.
if Fritz knows of anybody who wants to,
Yeah.
point them to our website.
Sounds good.
Do we get a chance to look at the questions they'll be asking at any point? Or once we pick someone, it's entirely up to them?
Yeah, yes, in essence. So we did expression of interest with the hope of getting like interested parties to do follow-up, almost interviews with them to like, because part of the grant application I had to put together a proposal of like how we thought it was gonna go. But then it's almost working then with the consultant to say, okay, how is it actually gonna go?
Sure.
And some part of it is, it's almost like a 2-part thing, and then one part is super prescribed by the province. The province says the housing assessment needs to consider all this data analysis essentially, right? And here's all the data online, so part of the consultant job is just like, do what the province wants you to do, right? It's gonna look the same as everybody else's. And the second part is the piece where we've built in, like, okay, it's doing the interviews with stakeholders, and it's meeting probably with this committee, and it's doing, and all that stuff, and that's where there's more avenue to like
Good.
shape
Yeah,
it.
so there will be
Yeah.
involvement,
Yeah.
they will be involved at some point. Okay, anything else before we adjourn?
Just, there will be a housing piece in the island survey, which will be launched probably this week or, no, next week.
Yeah, and some of that came from when I talked to a consultant before putting in the grant application. She was saying, oh, well, you really need some like specific questions that she would like, she was saying, well, as part of the consultant could do the division, but based on when we got the grant and going to have a consultant, I essentially had to do it, which is questions about like, are you in core housing need and household size and dwelling size? Because our last year, the survey asked more like opinion questions of people, so it's less invasive, but it's like, do you think, what's your view on that state of housing, as opposed to just trying to be like, in your household, what's your state of
Absolutely.
your housing?
What's your
to get
income?
that.
It relates. I think
Yeah,
it's
I don't
really
know if
worth
we
it.
ask income, but I think we ask if you're spending more than 30% of your income, so
Okay,
Yeah, and
it's a balance of like how invasive are we being
I
in
know.
the questions, and,
but still, when I read
Yeah.
all those housing surveys,
yeah,
it made a huge difference. The more specific they were,
yeah,
the more you could get real information.
yeah.
Okay, I'm going to, with that, adjourn.
Thank you
Time wrap.
very much.
And if anybody wants to discuss, Fritz sent out an email about something about Cape Running Curve, so if people want to have a chat about that, we can do that unofficially now. But and I think just to maybe reiterate the point, if you do have something that you think is of interest for the committee, you can send it. Use caution. We don't want like a flood of emails.